On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the UFC London main event, which is now featuring Shawn Brady taking on Leon Edwards. He replaces Jack Della Maddalena. If you watched my preview of the Leon Edwards JDM fight, apologies, but I had to do an updated version here because obviously Shawn Brady has stepped in on short notice. They moved JDM to the Bilal Muhammad title fight. My name is James Lynch. If you've never watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, and then I'm going to give you my prediction for this fight at the end. Let me know in the comments which way you're leaning on this one. This is a very even fight. We'll talk about the odds a little bit later. They certainly reflect that, but excited to dig into the weeds with this fight. Again, it's going to be a very, very good fight and something that I think is going to be a little bit underrated. So this is a 5-round fight and going to be taking place March 22nd at the O2 Arena. Let's do a quick tail of the tape between these two. Leon Edwards, 33. Shawn Brady, 32. That's one thing that kind of surprised me. For some reason, I thought Brady was a bit younger. I think people also think that Edwards is a bit older because he's been in the UFC for a while. But yeah, 33 to 32, so not a big age gap there. 6'2" to 5'10", so Leon going to be a little bit taller, although he's usually like that against most of his opponents. 74-inch reach to 72.5, so not a huge difference there, but it is a difference, and that Leon Edwards will be a little bit bigger in this fight. Let's start first with the former welterweight champion Leon Edwards, as he looks to get back on the winning track after losing his title to current champion Bilal Muhammad. All right, so you can see it there. He's got a 22-4 record. He's got 7 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 11 decisions. He's currently ranked number 1 in the welterweight division. He's going to have a 3-inch height and 1.5-inch reach advantage in this fight. Trains at a Team Renegade BJJ. He was the one-time welterweight champion. He had 2 successful title defenses. He's the first Jamaican-born UFC champion in UFC history. He's got performance of the night 2 times against Seth Bajinski and Kamaru Usman in their second fight. He's got the 6th fastest finish in UFC history against Seth Bajinski at just 8 seconds. People forget that fight. Leon Edwards had an amateur debut way back in October of 2011, made his March of 2011, made his pro debut a couple months later in June, made his UFC debut in November of 2014. So he's been in the UFC over a decade. I think people forget that. And still had a lot of fights coming into his debut, right? If you look at it there, he was, I think, 9 fights coming into this one, or 8 fights, if my math's correct. Losing to Claudio Silva, a fight that if you go back and watch that one, I think Leon Edwards actually won that fight. Kind of a robbery there. He's 14-3 in the UFC. He's got 5 stoppage victories. Some notable wins for Leon Edwards include Vicente Luque, Donald Cowboy Cerrone, Gunnar Nelson, Rafael Dos Anjos, Nate Diaz, Kamaru Usman. He's got 2 wins over Usman. And then Colby Covington as well. Some notable losses include Kamaru Usman and his last fight, which was against Bilal Muhammad. He's had a bunch of layoffs in his career. Let's go through some of them. So going from Rafael Dos Anjos to Bilal Muhammad, there was a 602-day layoff. Going from Nate Diaz, not Nick, to Kamaru Usman, there was a 434-day layoff. Then lately he's been a little bit more active, going from Colby to Bilal, there was a 224-day layoff, and then going from Bilal to this fight, there's only a 238-day layoff. And part of that was COVID. Remember, he couldn't leave the country, being from London. There's some issues there, and then some injuries and some other stuff too. But nothing crazy there. One fight, he's had a couple close fights. I mentioned the Claudio Silva fight. That's a long time ago. We don't need to talk about that. Like I said, most people felt like Edwards won that one. How about the Kamaru Usman trilogy? Some people felt like that was close. That was a majority decision for him back at UFC 286 in March of 2023. If you go look at the media scorecards for that one, 19 scored it for Edwards, 11 scored it a draw. So again, not that far off from people thinking that possibly could have been a draw in that fight, and only 2 media members scored the fight for Kamaru Usman. Let's look at the stats here for Leon Edwards. So Leon Edwards' significant strikes landed per minute is 2.68. So he gets a decent amount of strikes off. His striking accuracy is at 53%. His striking defense is at 53%. He doesn't get hit that much. His takedown average is 1.25. Takedown accuracy is only at 36%. So don't know if he'll be going for any takedowns here. And his takedown defense is at 65%. Sub-average 0.4. It doesn't have a lot of submission victories, like I mentioned, just 3 total in his career. That's pretty much everything you need to know about the former welterweight champion Leon Edwards. Now let's dig into his opponent, Shawn Brady. 17-1 record. He's got 3 knockouts, 5 submissions, and 8 decisions. He's currently ranked number 5 in the division. He's 32 years old, 5'10" with a 72.5-inch reach. So he's only a year younger than Leon Edwards. He trains at a Renzo Gracie Philly. He's a BJJ black belt under Daniel Gracie. He's got performance of the night 2 times against Christian Aguilera and Calvin Gaslam. Made his amateur debut back in August of 2012, winning in 9 seconds. Very impressive there. Look at that, 9 seconds. Made his pro debut in August of 2014. So I believe he made his pro debut a few months before Leon Edwards made his UFC debut. So obviously Leon been in the UFC a lot longer, despite them just being 1 year apart age-wise. Also won that fight very quickly as well, 33 seconds. So that's kind of interesting. Made his UFC debut in October of 2019. He took out Court McGee. He's 7-1 in the UFC. He's got 3 stoppage victories. Got wins over Michael Chiesa, Kelvin Gastelum, and Gilbert Burns most recently. Very good win over Gilbert Burns. His only loss was to Bilal Muhammad. Unfortunately, Brady's always going to be known as the guy that got finished by Bilal Muhammad. That's something that people use against him. I remember a lot of people wrote off Shawn Brady after that, but obviously coming out after that, getting 2 wins in a row, certainly made people more of a believer in Shawn Brady. And if you remember before that finish, I want to just quickly mention this. That fight was fairly even right before the finish. Brady, it looked like he gassed or something happened, but Bilal sort of took over and then ended up getting the finish. But if I remember correctly, the fight was fairly close prior to Bilal finishing him, sort of just took over a little bit later in that fight. Okay, he's had a couple layoffs, Shawn Brady has. So after the Bilal Muhammad fight, going to Kelvin Gastelum, there was a 406-day layoff. Remember, he had a couple fights follow with Michel Pereira and Jack Della Maddalena. Imagine if Pereira fight happened. That's kind of interesting. And JDM. I mean, I still want to see that fight at some point. Going from Kelvin to Gilbert Burns, there was a 280-day layoff. And then going from Gilbert Burns to Leon Edwards, just 196 days. So if you look at it there, Shawn Brady has actually fought sooner than Leon Edwards has. So that's one thing to keep in mind. He's had a bunch of injuries. We're not going to go through all of them, but he's supposed to fight Kevin Lee, Michel Pereira, Jack Della Maddalena, Vicente Luque. All those were due to injury. Actually, the Jack fight was due to a staph infection, if you remember. That was supposed to take place on International Fight Week. Let's look at Shawn Brady's stats right now. So a little bit less than Leon Edwards in terms of the strikes. Actually, no, it's higher. Never mind. That's kind of weird. Figured it would be lower. Shawn Brady has more significant strikes landed per minute than Leon Edwards does. Look at that. 4.09. His striking accuracy is at 55%. His striking defense is at 60%. His takedown defense is at 85%. You look at it there. His takedowns landed per 15 minutes is 3.49, so he does utilize that wrestling. His takedown accuracy is at 52%. His sub-average is 0.9, similar to Leon Edwards. I think Edwards was 0.4, yeah. But look at the takedown average there, too. Brady's stats are higher there, 1.25 compared to Brady, who's 3.49. So his stats look a little bit impressive. But keep in mind, too, Brady's stats look a little bit better because he's fought easier opposition too. That's one thing that Leon has over him. He's fought better opposition. Not to mention Leon has a lot more fights than Shawn Brady does. I just mentioned it there. Brady's only got 9 UFC fights. Leon Edwards has 17 fights. So there's a bit of a difference there. That's just one thing I want to mention. Not to say that Brady isn't better than Leon. I just, those are things to point out. Again, because Leon's had a little bit more. Now let's look at the odds here. This is interesting. So very close, right? And again, Leon had a full camp for this one. He knew he was always going to be on this card. Brady steps in. He's always training, but it's always a little bit different when you have a date and an opponent. So Shawn Brady just a slight favorite here at -138 in a couple books. Leon Edwards a slight underdog here. And then if you look on, this is another interesting thing, and I talked about this in the other breakdown with Jan and Olberg. Look at this. It's actually flipped the other way. More people on Tapology picking Leon Edwards over Shawn Brady, 54% to 46%. So this is a tough one, guys. Again, I could see a couple different ways this can go. Just so people know, I actually picked Leon Edwards against Jack Della Maddalena, but in this breakdown, I'm actually going the other way here. I'm going to go with Shawn Brady. Now, this is a bit of an interesting pick because this kind of goes against the grain of how I normally pick my fights. Normally, I base it off level of opposition, and fighters can have off nights and all that different stuff. But this one, it's a couple things. Let me explain why I'm picking Shawn Brady here. Okay, so first and foremost, I think there's just more potential with him right now. I feel like even though there's only a year apart in terms of the age between the two, I feel like Brady, especially since he got that surgery, remember the big critique with him and Michael Chiesa was that, he has bad cardio, he can't last, because remember he slowed down against Chiesa in the 3rd round. I think we've seen an improvement there, over the last couple fights where we've seen him, go a little bit longer and have a little bit more potential. The stats there are impressive. I just showed you that. The strikes landed per minute, the wrestling. I think Brady has a little bit more to offer right now. And I think there's a possibility we could see Brady look even better in this fight than we have in other fights that he's had. So again, I'm kind of betting a bit on potential here. I think that Brady can show a little bit more than Leon Edwards can at this stage in his career. Edwards has fought better opposition. Like I mentioned, he has more 5-round experience, but again, there's one key thing here. And that is, if you look at Leon's last couple fights, and I talked about this in the JDM breakdown as well, but listen, all the marks to Bilal Muhammad. If you remember going into that fight, I did pick Bilal over Leon. I was right. I did not expect Bilal to be that dominant. Now, Leon's coach said he had a back injury or whatever. I don't think that played a huge role in the loss. I think Bilal was just better. But I also think there's there's kind of a case here that Leon maybe isn't looking as good as we all think. Like that Colby fight. Again, I know Colby didn't do anything in that fight. So, he's mainly to blame for how that fight looked so, let's be honest, lackluster. But Leon's partially to blame too. Why was he not more aggressive? Why didn't he do more in that fight? I think you can look that there's 2 fights in a row now that Leon has not performed that well. Is it possible we're seeing a decline? Now, typically we don't see fighters at 33 years of age be on a decline. Usually it's 35 and higher, but maybe we are at the point where Leon's declining a little bit, right? Even that last Kamaru Usman prior to that, it was a win, but it wasn't one of those wins where you're like, man, he decisively won that fight and he got it done. I don't know. Like, I think there's some question marks about Leon Edwards, whereas with Brady, I think we saw in that Gilbert Burns fight, especially, and granted, Burns is definitely on the downside of his career. I don't think there's any question about that. But Brady looked very dominant there. He also finished Kelvin Gastelum, which is very tough to do too. So I think that's very impressive too. Now, the reason I'm leaning Brady decision, or I should tell you, I'm going Brady decision here. I'm not going stoppage. 53% of Brady's wins are by submission. He hasn't finished a lot of his fights. Just 5 wins by submission, 3 by knockout. I don't believe Leon Edwards has ever been submitted. He hasn't, so I'm not leaning submission there. And the other thing that you could maybe look at here is, again, Brady got finished by Bilal. I can see people in the comments being like, well, Bilal can knock him out, then Leon Edwards could. Leon Edwards only has 1 knockout win in his last 9 fights, and that last knockout win was the Kamaru Usman win, which was late in the fight. That's probably not going to happen here against Shawn Brady. I just feel, again, this is just the eye test. This is just what I see. I feel like right now Brady is a little bit more well-rounded and a little bit better in this spot here. So I'm expecting a close fight. Honestly, guys, if I'm going to bet this fight, I mean, you're getting pretty good odds on Brady as it is. I'm looking at the over and I'm looking at the fight goes the distance. I know I say that a lot on these breakdowns, but this does seem like a very close fight where I don't think that either has finishing ability to get it done within the 5 rounds. Again, there are some concerns with Brady, right? Like he didn't get the full camp. He hasn't fought the opposition that Edwards has, but I think he's just got a little bit more to offer at this point. And I think there is a case that Leon might be on a bit of a decline. Like I said, he did not look competitive at all against Bilal Muhammad. And maybe Bilal's that good. Maybe if, Brady rematches Bilal, it's going to go the same way and he's going to get finished again. Maybe that happens, but I'm kind of betting on potential here. And that's why I think Brady takes the decision. So again, maybe not the most popular pick. I know the odds agree with me here, but I'm going to go Shawn Brady by decision. So I want to know who you're picking in the comment section below. Let me know who you're picking. Let me know how you think they get it done. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. This is Early Look. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.